Sarah Onderdonk Linkletter. Have you gone past the house over on South Strathmore? One with the giant pillars and the road going around it? Oh, you seem to know it. That was my father's house, Horatio Gates Onderdonk. And I believe to this day it's called the Onderdonk House. And there are lectures to the public and all sorts of activities. I was very happy to see that they restored the gardens in the spring. Who knew that they could move mature shrubs from one location and bring it to an entirely different location? I was very happy. When I got married, my father did not spare an expense. I married Durrance Linkletter, the doctor. We had no children. The years went by very quickly, managing the household and all, and I had help, of course. I lived to be 86 years old, and now here I am, buried with many of my family members, my parents. Where you see the red roses are, that's my grave. When I passed, my will was a very hefty stack of papers. You see, since I had no children, I had to decide to whom I would leave all my money. So I left money to my brother, Andrew J. Onderdonk. I believe there's a road around here named after him. He was a lawyer, and he was a fair and honest man. I left him $79,700.18. Now, what year is it? What year are we in today? 2022. Time flies. That $79,700.18 today would be $1,800,159.32. Just remarkable. I also left $5,000 to the Nassau Hospital. I believe you call it Winthrop today. And I left $250 to the Hill and Valley Fire Department here in Manhasset. It was very important to me to support the local fire department, especially after the horrible fire that happened here in 1912 at the Christ Church. And I left $500 to the Christ Church and another $500 to the Reformed Church behind me because I attended both. I just could not decide. It depended which preacher was preaching that week. My executors were my brother Andrew and my nephew George. But most important to me was that they would decorate the graves on certain holidays for 10 years. And those holidays that I requested were Easter, Decoration Day, All Souls Day, and Christmas Day. I think that's a fitting tribute, don't you? So next holiday, won't you stop by and see, are they still decorating my grave? And let me know, won't you? Thank you. Oh, that would be lovely. I'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is my pet, Andrea.
My name is Nancy Fox, and I'm here to pay my respects to my brother, Nicholas Fox. We're a family that lived in Plandome. Maybe you know the area is not far from here. My dad was Albert Fox. He was a textile merchant, and he did very well in business so that we could afford a very large house. And it was Plandome Park. That was the actual area that we lived in. They didn't even have numbers on the houses at that time. It was 1925 when we lived there. And, Nicholas was known to be the wild child. I was the good one. My dad was actually born in England, and so was Nicholas. And then I'm part of the second family, as it were. My dad married again here in America. And we all lived in the house in Plandome. And, Nicholas was a bit rambunctious when he became a young man. He was actually pulled over for speeding in his motor car as a young man. And the traffic cop who pulled him over gave him a ticket. And Nicholas, you know Nicholas, he took that ticket and then he ripped it up and threw it in the officer's face. And he said something like, "You can't do anything to me. My father pays $5,000 in taxes." Well, I'm sure you can guess it didn't go well for Nicholas saying that to the public. Nicholas spent the night in jail. It was in Queens. It was in Flushing, Queens County Jail at that time. So they did the usual. They processed him. They took his fingerprints, had him in handcuffs. We called him the whippersnapper after that incident. But when he came home from the jail, he was a little bit sheepish. He did go on to do something good with his life. He went ahead and became an advertising salesman in the city. He worked for a big agency, and after all, he had the gift of gab, so he did pretty well with that. He was 31, single, living in Manhattan. His roommate was named Ralph, and he was on East 68th Street. So that's where they lived in 1938. Well, he didn't live there. I'll tell you what happened next. He took a trip to visit friends up in New England, and this is the ship he went on. It was part of the Colonial Lines. It was the Arrow, and he was on the ship, which would leave every day from Pier 11 in New York City. It would go through Long Island Sound and up north. It was only $4.25 for the fare round trip to Boston. That was 1938. Well, Nicholas took the trip, and on the way back, it was an overnight trip to return to New York City. So it was kind of cold, October, and somehow at 1 o'clock in the morning on the return trip, they checked his stateroom, and he wasn't there. His clothing was there, as though he had just stepped away, but he was missing, and they presumed him to have gone overboard. He was gone. We have no idea what actually happened. But a week later, there was a body that washed up on shore on the Connecticut side of Long Island Sound. It was not far from Bridgeport. It was a place called Sasko Beach. It was originally a John Doe. They didn't know who this body was. The Fairfield County medical examiner had to do some research to look into figuring out who could this be. Well, after a lot of careful study, all the investigative work that they did, the medical examiner did determine that was the body of Nicholas Fox, identified through his fingerprints. So the whole family came. We had a ceremony, a memorial service here at the church. By now, it was February of 1939, after they had identified the body, gone through lots of paperwork, and then shipped the body here. He's buried here next to our baby sister, Margaret Ann, who only lived a year. And on his tombstone, it says, "Beloved by all, but we'll still call him our whippersnapper." So thank you for coming to hear his story, and have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Sarah Emmeline Smith. I lived in this area my entire life until about 1886, when I was 58 years old. As a high society Victorian woman, I was very, very familiar with the secret language of the fan. Besides, how else would one be in the know? Now, depending on your wealth and status, your fan would be made of paper, vellum, or lace, and also other fabrics could be used too. There were many different ornaments that you could put on this. It would be made out of rather, and it could be mother of pearl, beads, feathers, all sorts of things, and it would have depictions on them, typically of different scenes. Now, they were best for keeping cool in the summer, with warding off the vapors, but that was usually when you were faint or feeling unwell. But these could also be used to send secret messages across the room without uttering a word, as it was considered an extension of one's body language. Now, ladies would use this fan language in large social gatherings such as balls or dances in order to flirt with a handsome gentleman across the way. It was like passing notes in class, as you would have. It wasn't proper for young ladies like me in my time to, speak to gentlemen before they were formally introduced, as behavior and formality was highly scrutinized. Secret languages don't work when no one understands you, so allow me to demonstrate a few. We would typically try to convey these when no one else was around. I think we're okay in this spot. Now, if I twirl my fan in my left hand like this, it means we are watched, and you have to speak at a later date. If I touch the tip of my fan like this, it means I wish to speak to you. Now, the simple answers are a must. To rest on your right cheek means yes. Left cheek means no. If one wanted to signal they were available for conversation, they would hold it in their left hand open like this, which means come and talk to me. Now, a more flirtatious way of doing this would be open in the left hand in front of the face, which means desirous of your acquaintance. You could motion to your sweetheart, I love you, by drawing the fan across your cheek. Or kiss me by holding the handle to your lips. Or you could tell that eager suitor I'm engaged by fanning quickly. Or just tell them we will be friends by lowering it. Now, the last one, if you find somebody you absolutely loathe, you could tell them I hate you by drawing it through your hand like this. I have never done such things. Now, I know I'm buried in this cemetery with my family, according to the church register, but the tombstones are so old and faded, I can't seem to find my plot. I think I'm somewhere over there. I can't seem to find my headstone. You know how hard it is to find the right smiths? Now, in the words of the fan, don't forget me. And with my pinky finger extended, I will bid you all a goodbye.
My gentle friends, I wish to thank you for please coming in a pleased way, for coming to my humble gravesite. You know, these days, not many people come to say hello, but you have. So, I will tell you my story. But I've been remiss and slightly rude, for I have not introduced myself. I am Dr. Benjamin Treadwell, at your service. Now, I was born in the village of Hempstead on a nice, calm afternoon in May in the year 1735. I did my growing up early years in Hempstead, and as I got into my late teens, I wanted to be a physician. So I apprenticed, as they did in those days, because there was no real medical schools, except for some of the major universities, but even then they were rooted in town, with a local doctor in Hempstead. I practiced with him up until my life changed in the year 1754. Now, a great conflagration or war erupted in Europe between the Austrian Empire, the Kingdom of Prussia, Kingdom of France, and the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. I, being a loyalist and a true believer in my liege Lord King George II, having rights to the land west of Fort Pitt, I supported him. Now, the French didn't agree with the king at all. They said no. So they wanted all the land upstate New York and parts of Pennsylvania. But I, in 1757, at the age of 22, decided to serve my king. So I gathered up my medical instruments and signed on the privateer Hercules as their ship surgeon. Now this is an example of one of my medical tools and instruments. I will go into it later if you have a question. Otherwise, I don't want to spoil your dinner coming up. Now, I served on the Hercules until the end of the war. And then I decided it was time to settle down. So I wanted to get married, have children, and believe it or not only practice being a doctor, but farm. So I married in 1762 my darling and beautiful Elizabeth Seabeck. We lived here in North Hempstead for a while. Then we moved to Westbury, in an area you now call Old Westbury, very close to the North Hempstead Turnpike. Now, St. George's Parish in Hempstead was the only Anglican church in this area, believe it or not. So it was roughly a 2-hour ride by carriage to church. Now, Elizabeth and I were a very active couple. We had 9 children. So you can imagine what it was like taking 9 children in a carriage 2 hours to church, which probably they didn't want to go to in the first place, constantly calling out, "Are we there yet?" So, being on the vestry, I realized certain things. And a number of the other vestrymen and I got together and we decided to form a parish in the north. So we petitioned the bishop to obtain a dispensation to form a church. And we received it. And we founded Christ Church. Now, it's interesting as a side note that my family was one of the founding families of what you call Long Island. This being Queens County at the time I was living, along with the Townsends, the Hewletts, the Skanks, the Ongadons. We were all old families. As a matter of fact, my grandfather came here from Oxfordshire in 1635. Now, all good things must come to an end. So the good Lord, in his infinite wisdom, called me to rest at the age of 94. I died on the 24th of June, 1830. The Long Island Telegraph and General Advertiser published an obituary, which in my very humble way, I found quite pleasing. In essence, it said, "To the general esteem and high confidence the community has in this aged physician who practiced to the last and maintained a large portion of his community, we now say thank you." That, my friends, is my humble story, and I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, I don't get many people anymore, and at my aged stage in life, it takes a lot to manifest myself in this form. So I thank you for coming.
So how did you use the phone?
Oh, I knew someone was going to ask that. Well,
You got my curiosity.
this device or instrument, now you have to remember the time. It was the middle of the 18th century. Medicine had not progressed as far as it has today. So there was no means of treating wounds that we considered serious but mendable. But in those days, this instrument was used to separate the flesh so that I could separate it with retractors and then apply the bone saw to cut off the arm and the leg in that manner. Amputation being what they did. Unfortunately, we had no anesthesia or real anesthetics, so we plied them with rum, which I'm partial to, or we hit them on the head. Whatever took place. But because of the general nature of the practice of amputation, you know, by the time I sutured the arteries and the veins and then applied the dressings, which wasn't really that antiseptic in those days, we had a fairly high mortality rate among the sailors. So that's my story. And thank you again for coming.
Thanks, Don.
Thank you.
I am the Reverend Charles Laurie Newbold. As the 11th rector here at Christ Church, I served for 35 years, from 1883 until my retirement in 1918. My picture is just over to the left of these tombstones over here. On your way out, feel free to take a peek. As you can imagine, I saw quite a few changes during my tenure here as rector, but nothing quite as dramatic as what happened on the evening of September 11th, 1912. At 10 minutes to 5 that Wednesday evening, lightning struck the steeple of the church, and within minutes, the entire church had burned to the ground. There was nothing left. As you can imagine, we spent a few months grieving and mourning the loss of our church building, but we decided, and we knew we had to, begin the process of rebuilding. So we went out and we solicited estimates for the cost. We had to find a contractor to do the work, and we had to raise the money. Finally, we settled on a contract with Small and Walsh contractors for $32,000 to build the church as you see it now. The foundation stone was laid on September 28th, 1913, and everything was going along well until we realized that this new church was going to be a bit bigger than the previous one. And so we also realized that the tombstones in row K, which would have been right along the wall of the church, had to be removed in order for the church to be built upon that ground. So we went forward with that decision, but not everybody agreed with us about the removal of some of the tombstones. Just after the laying of that foundation stone, I received an angry letter from a Mr. Henry W. Allen. He had come to the church to check on the work and to see the graves of his relatives, the Morells and the Allens. In this letter, he wrote about desecration of graves, and he used the phrase, "You and the vestry," the governing body of the church, "are certainly good at destroying." So I replied to his letter immediately, first to appease his anger, but second and most importantly to quiet any talk about desecration of graves, which was not happening. I informed him that his relatives, the Morells and the Allens, their tombstones may have been destroyed in the fire or were removed, but the graves themselves were not touched. They are buried under the church. I also informed him that we did our best to reach out to the living relatives of all those buried under the church to get their permissions, and we did receive some from those who understood the work we needed to do. I reminded him that the church, it ministers to the living and not to the dead. And in my letter to him, I concluded with this line that I rather liked: "A congregation that is dead will have none to care for its graves, and will soon become obliterated." Inside the church, on the east and the west walls, are plaques, brass plaques with the names of all those whose tombstones were either destroyed in the fire on September 11th, 1912, or were removed for the building of the church as you see it. I'm confident that these individuals are resting in peace, as they are, after all, buried in holy ground here at Christ Church. I hope you've enjoyed that little piece of our history here at our beloved Christ Church, Manhasset. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's good. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Sylvanus S. Smith, born on the 4th of July, 1803. I'm a Yankee Doodle dandy, a Yankee Doodle do or die. A real live nephew of my Uncle Sam, born on the 4th of July. I've got a Yankee Doodle sweetheart. She's my Yankee Doodle joy. Yankee Doodle went to London just to ride the ponies. I am that Yankee Doodle boy. So I died on March 11, 1888. I'd like you to remember that date. So, how old was I when I died? 84? What was the life expectancy in the early 1800s? 40. You got it. Not too many people get it. Most people like 60 or 50. So why was that? No antibiotics. Doctors didn't feel like they needed to wash their hands. Baths were considered bad for your health. And many, many women died in childbirth. The life expectancy for women at that time was less than that. So I'd like to share these words with you. They were written about me right here in our church's Book of Minutes. An upright and conscientious church member who, during his long and useful life, devoted his energies and personal means towards the advancement of Christianity, both in church and state. His attachment to this church and his generous contributions to its various needs rendered him one of its most efficient pillars, and his memory will always endure among that of its benefactors. Now that's how I'd like people to remember me, as a pillar. So, remember that date, March 11, 1888. I was buried several days later than usual. There was a big delay due to the blizzard of 1888. It blanketed the East Coast all the way from Chesapeake Bay up to Maine. So did you ever hear of it? I hadn't either. Get this, it snowed for 4 days straight in the middle of March. Long Island recorded 60 inches of snow, 5 feet of snow, and that's without drifting. There was $20 million worth of damage, which doesn't sound like much, but by today's standard, over $500 million, $600 million. People all over Long Island were stranded or trapped in their homes for several days. So put yourself back in that time. Imagine this. No radar, no snow plows, no phones, no radios, and no EMS teams. I never saw anything like it. Well, I guess I really couldn't have seen it because I died the day it began. They couldn't dig my grave for several days after the snow stopped. While I was alive, in addition to being an assemblyman for Queens County, I was vestryman or councilman right here at Christ Church, and I was the clerk or secretary. So it was my job to record all of those meetings, which were usually pretty boring. However, there were a few times when things got quite interesting. For instance, after a vote at one meeting, they tore down a large enclosure on the east side of the church, the far side of the church, in order to make space for 3 new rows of burial plots. At the very next meeting, they voted to put up a picket fence instead, in the exact same location. So if you wander back there after your tour, you'll see there's no picket fence, there are no burial plots, just a garden. One last quick story. A new rule was put in place during my time on the vestry. Any member of the vestry who fails to attend a called meeting shall, without sufficient excuse, pay a fine of $1. It's only $30 by today's standards, but I suppose they thought they'd be able to pay off all those bills you heard our treasurer speak of. So, and did you catch that part about sufficient excuses for missing a meeting? Some of those excuses might have been, my pigs got in my corn, a fox got in my hen house, I broke a wagon wheel, or my favorite, there was a snake in my boot. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Thank you very much. If you'd like to take a look, this is an embossing tool which I would have used during that time. And there's an example of the marketplace.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Isabelle Lefamadieu. I was born in Southampton, England. My father was Walter Manning. We lived at 3 Brook Road. In 1919, when I was only 17 years old, I boarded a ship called the Lapland and set sail for America. I stayed with my sister and helped with her baby girl. Her husband, Fred, died of the Spanish influenza right before Christmas. It was so tragic. I worked as a domestic when I arrived in America to earn some money and help my sister. We lived in Little Neck, right down the road. It wasn't long before I met Arnold. He was so handsome. 1962, right here in this very church, I was a June bride of age 20, 100 years ago. Don't I look good? We lived right nearby up Middle Neck Road in Great Neck. Just a hop, skip, and a jump to get here to church on Sundays. Arnold and I was married for 43 wonderful years. But sadly, Arnold passed away. I had a splendid idea. I would donate a stained glass window to the church. I was so pleased with how it came out. It's in memory of my one true love, Arnold, and my mother-in-law. Let's go together to see this window. You'll never find it without me escorting you in the sanctuary of all the Here's the window. Isn't it just beautiful? With the New York City skyline, the saints and the bishops, even Joan of Arc. If you look way up at the top, you'll see the hand of God. The name, Le Homme de Dieu, means man of God. You'll see the mirrors. Isn't that a nice touch? It reminds us and represents, when we look at these mirrors, we're all saints. This window was designed by Catherine Lamb Tate. We estimate it was installed around 1967-68. They were married in 1922. They were married for 43 years. So we're very happy with the way our window turned out. It cost $3,380 back in the day. Thank you all for coming to see me. We appreciate that you joined us.
What did your husband do that you could afford that?
My husband did lots of different things.
Very good with money.
He was very good with money. Yes, very good with money.
I couldn't afford that today.